My name is Lana, and I'm 56 years old. I never thought I'd be standing here telling you this, but sometimes life surprises you in ways you never see coming. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my son Ethan's life, the day he married Vivian, the woman he loved. But for me, it turned out to be a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. On that day, instead of joy, I found myself standing in front of 200 guests, my heart breaking as Vivian, my son's new wife, kicked me out of the wedding. Not only was I humiliated in front of strangers, but also in front of half of my extended family, her wealthy father, and even Ethan's childhood best friend, who wouldn't even look me in the eye as I was shown the door. As I walked away, I felt this deep, heavy ache in my chest. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I simply walked out, feeling like I was being erased from my son's life in front of everyone. It was the most heart-wrenching moment I've ever experienced. Have you ever been told to leave your own child's wedding? It's a question I never thought I'd ask myself, let alone answer. But it happened to me. And if something like this has ever happened to you, I want you to understand just how much it hurts. It's like your world comes crashing down in an instant. One moment, you're excited and proud to see your child start a new chapter, and the next, you're left feeling small and invisible. I'm sure many of you can relate to the pain of feeling excluded, especially by someone you love. I wasn't just kicked out of a wedding that day. I was rejected by the person I had raised and sacrificed everything for. To be ignored and pushed aside by the person you thought would always stand by you, it cuts deeper than anything. The whole wedding turned into a symbol of exclusion for me. It wasn't just a party. It was a painful reminder of how much I had been shut out from Ethan's life. I felt like I was no longer a part of his world. And it was more than just the wedding. It was the way Vivian had treated me for months. The way Ethan had stood silently as I was humiliated. I thought back to all the years I spent raising him, working 2 jobs just to give him the best life I could. I gave everything for him, and in that one moment, it felt like none of it mattered. The pain I felt wasn't just from being kicked out of the wedding. It was from being made to feel like I was no longer relevant in his life, like I didn't matter. But the worst part? I was blindsided. I had no idea things were this bad between me and Ethan. I had no idea that Vivian had worked so hard to erase me from everything. And it was only after the wedding, when I started putting the pieces together, that I realized just how deep the betrayal really ran. But enough about the pain. Let me tell you the whole story, but first, take a moment and hit that subscribe button. It will really help me out during this phase, and I'd love to have you here for the full journey. Also, tell me in the comments, what would you do in a situation like this? Have you ever experienced something similar? I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with all of you who understand this kind of hurt. So stick with me and let me take you through the rest of the story. What happened next wasn't just about a wedding. It was about discovering secrets I never thought I'd uncover and finding the strength to stand up for myself in ways I never imagined. I raised my son, Ethan, on my own. His father walked out on us when Ethan was just a little boy. I never saw it coming, but life has a way of throwing things at you when you least expect them. From the moment his father left, it was just me and him. I had to put in the work, not just as a mother, but as a provider. There was no other choice. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, just to make sure he had what he needed. During the day, I worked as a bank teller, doing everything I could to keep us afloat. And at night, I worked at a retail store, packing boxes, answering customer calls, and keeping everything running. I wasn't going to let my son feel like he was missing out on anything, even though we didn't have much. I remember those long nights, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how I could make things better for him. But even when it was hard, I kept my head up and told myself I was doing it for him. I wanted him to have everything I never had, a chance to make his own way in the world, to have the education and opportunities that I never could afford. Despite the constant struggle, I was proud of how we made it work. Ethan had a good childhood. I did the best I could. I'd always told him that I might not have money, but I would always have love to give. And as far as I was concerned, that was enough. I did everything to keep our little family unit strong. I supported him through school, cheered him on at his sports events, and watched him grow into the young man he was meant to be. He was my pride and joy, and I didn't care if the world thought I was just getting by. Ethan was everything to me. And then came Vivian. When Ethan told me he was marrying Vivian, I wasn't sure what to think. She came from a completely different world. Vivian's father was a dentist, well off, and used to the finer things in life. I'd seen how she carried herself, well-groomed, polished, and everything about her screamed wealth and social status. The way she dressed, the way she talked, it was all so foreign to me. I would tell myself, it's okay. They're in love. That's what matters. But as time went on, I couldn't help but notice the differences between us. Vivian was from a world that I wasn't familiar with. The dinners they went to, the places they vacationed, the things they bought, it all felt like a different planet. I would tell myself, it's okay. They're in love. That's what matters. But despite my attempts to keep the peace, something was off. Every time I tried to step in, to offer help with the wedding or anything else, she seemed to push me away. At first, it was just small things, like when I offered to help plan the wedding. She politely declined, saying they had it covered. Then, when I tried to help with the invitations, I was told, it's already taken care of, but thanks for offering. She didn't want me involved, but I didn't say anything. I thought maybe it was just nerves. Maybe she was just stressed out with all the planning. So I kept my distance, hoping it was just a phase, hoping things would get better. But things didn't get better. In fact, they started to get worse. It became clear that I wasn't welcomed into the family the way I had hoped. Even when I tried to be involved, I was ignored. One of the first things that hurt was when they sent out the wedding website. I wasn't listed as the mother of the groom. Vivian's parents were mentioned, of course, in big, bold letters about how supportive they were. But I, his mother, was barely a footnote. I couldn't understand it. Had I done something wrong? Was I being punished for trying to help? My name was left out of the description of who Ethan's parents were, and instead, there was just a generic line about how the families were happy to see Ethan and Vivian start this new chapter in their lives. I couldn't help but feel like an afterthought, like I wasn't even really part of the picture anymore. It wasn't just the website, it was the small, consistent slights that began to pile up. I wasn't invited to the dress fittings. When I asked about it, Vivian said, "Oh, it's just the bridesmaids and immediate family." I wasn't part of that group. Not only was I excluded, but it felt like I wasn't wanted at all. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Vivian didn't just want me out of the wedding. She wanted me out of her life. Still, I tried to tell myself that it was nothing personal. I kept making excuses. I figured maybe she was just stressed with the wedding planning. Or maybe she didn't know how to deal with me. But the reality was becoming clearer every day. It wasn't just the wedding. It was about being made to feel invisible. It was about feeling like I didn't matter to the one person I loved more than anything in the world. And then came the dress fitting. When I finally picked out my dress, a soft, pale blue, nothing flashy, nothing too bold, I hoped it would show them that I was trying. I wasn't trying to steal the spotlight. I wasn't trying to compete with anyone. But Vivian didn't even bother to acknowledge the effort I put into trying to fit in. I spent hours trying to make myself look presentable. I went to a salon I couldn't really afford, just so I could have a better look than the usual place I went to. I even spent the night in a hotel, so I wouldn't risk being late for the ceremony. The day before the wedding, I was a wreck. My mind kept racing, thinking, what if I forget the card? What if I mess this up? In the back of my mind, I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to face the truth, because that truth might mean that my son, my sweet, thoughtful, loving boy, had changed, and the reality was too painful to face. It was easier to ignore it, to keep pretending that everything was okay. I didn't want to see what I feared I might discover, that my place in his life was becoming more and more like a stranger. And soon enough, that truth would slap me in the face in a way I would never expect. But despite everything, I held on to hope. I believed in my son's love. I believed in his respect for me. And so, I tried to stay out of the way. I tried to show them that I wanted the best for them. But somewhere along the way, I lost something. Something precious. Something I never thought I'd lose. My place in his heart. On the day of the wedding, I arrived right on time, trying to stay calm, but my heart was already racing. I had dressed carefully in my pale blue dress, something soft and simple, not too flashy. I wanted to blend in, not steal the spotlight. I'd spent the night at a nearby hotel to make sure I wouldn't be late, double-checking everything, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. But now, standing in front of the beautiful venue, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. My son was getting married. I had to remind myself that despite everything, I was here to see my child start a new chapter in his life. But little did I know, things were about to take a turn that I couldn't have anticipated. As I stepped inside, everything seemed perfect. The chairs were set up neatly. The floral arch at the front glowed in the sunlight, and the guests were talking in low voices, already seated. I could see some familiar faces, friends of Ethan from his childhood. I smiled at them, but no one really acknowledged me, or at least, it felt that way. Still, I tried to push it out of my mind. Maybe they were just busy, caught up in the moment. I walked toward the second row, where I spotted an empty seat, hoping to settle down quietly and enjoy the ceremony. But before I could even sit, I saw Vivian. She appeared from behind the floral arch, stepping directly into my path, like she had been waiting for me. Her makeup was heavier than usual, and her lips were pressed into a tight line. The look she gave me wasn't warm or welcoming. It was cold, calculated. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp. I was stunned. I hadn't expected this. I smiled awkwardly, hoping it was just some sort of misunderstanding. "I'm here for the wedding," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maybe she was just stressed, I thought. Maybe she didn't mean it the way it sounded. But she didn't smile back. Her eyes were hard, unfazed. "You weren't supposed to come," she said, her voice flat, like it was a fact she had already decided. My heart dropped, and a wave of confusion flooded over me. "What do you mean?" "I got an invitation," I said, trying to make sense of it all. Vivian folded her arms across her chest and stared at me, unblinking. "We revoked your invitation last night," she said, her tone unbothered. "Didn't you check your email?" I froze, completely taken aback. I hadn't checked my email last night. I was too busy getting ready for the wedding. Who checks their email the night before their only child's wedding. I hadn't even thought to do that. I didn't check my email, I said, trying to process what was happening. I was getting dressed, trying to calm my nerves. Who revokes an invitation like this? The words escaped before I could even think them through. I was angry now, and rightfully so. Then she dropped the bombshell. "Jason's my son," she said, like it was the only reason she needed to do this to me. We decided it would be less stressful this way. It felt like a slap in the face. Less stressful? For whom? Not for me, that was for sure. Not when I had spent all this time and effort planning for this day, supporting my son through his entire life. All I had done, all I had sacrificed, and this was how I was repaid. Behind her, I saw Ethan. He was standing near the groomsmen, half hidden in shadow, looking at me. But the most painful part was that he didn't even speak. Not one word. He didn't try to stop this. He didn't try to defend me. He just looked away. I felt my heart sink into my stomach. That look told me everything. It told me that he had chosen her, and in doing so, he had chosen to cut me out. I wasn't just unwanted at the wedding. I was unwanted in his life. "Ethan," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "You're really going to let her do this? You're really going to let her throw me out of your wedding?" I couldn't believe it. The man I had raised, the man I had fought for, was standing there, silent, letting this happen. The humiliation was overwhelming. Vivian's mother appeared beside her, her arms gently resting on Vivian's. She gave me a cold smile, as if she was enjoying watching me unravel. "It's best you leave now, before we have to make a bigger deal out of this," she said, her voice dripping with faux politeness. I looked around, my chest tightening. Every pair of eyes seemed to be on me. I felt like a spectacle, the center of attention, but for all the wrong reasons. The entire room was watching the mother of the groom being escorted out of her own son's wedding. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I was shaking, my hands trembling by my side. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I didn't want to make a scene, but it was hard. It hurt so much. I could feel every single person in that room looking at me like I was the problem. I wasn't just being rejected by Vivian. I was being erased by my own son. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. But none of it mattered. I turned without another word, my legs feeling like they might give out from under me. I started walking toward the exit, past the tables, past the guests who glanced at me with those pitying looks I couldn't stand. I passed 2 old friends of Ethan's from high school. They barely met my eyes. One of them gave me a half-hearted smile. The kind of smile people give when they don't want to get involved. They didn't know what was happening, but they saw it. And that look, that pitying smile, just made everything worse. As I reached the edge of the garden, my feet faltered, and I saw Vivian's father. He was pacing around, talking quickly on the phone. His voice was loud enough for me to hear, and it wasn't hard to catch a single sentence. "As long as she doesn't talk, we're in the clear." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, trying to understand what he had just said. What was he talking about? Why did they care so much about me not talking? That single sentence told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't just about me being a bad mother-in-law. It wasn't just about me being too loud or too emotional or too in the way. This was about something much deeper, something they didn't want exposed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. They were hiding something, and they had gone to extreme lengths to shut me out because they didn't want me to figure it out. As I walked away, my thoughts were clouded with confusion and pain, but something else was beginning to emerge. Something I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the humiliation anymore. It was about finding out the truth. And I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. After I left the wedding, the sting of betrayal was almost unbearable. But as I drove back to my hotel room, something shifted inside me. I didn't cry, and I didn't feel sorry for myself. For the first time since I had been humiliated at the wedding, I felt a strange clarity. It was like a fog had lifted from my mind, and the emotions I had been drowning in suddenly settled into a quiet, focused anger. The betrayal wasn't just about being kicked out of the wedding. It wasn't just about Vivian or the way she treated me. This was something bigger, something deeper, something that had been brewing for a long time. It wasn't just about me being hurt. It was about the fact that I had been lied to, and there was something hidden beneath the surface. I had been pushed out, discarded like I didn't matter. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that there had to be a reason why they were so desperate to keep me out of the picture. I wasn't just going to walk away and pretend nothing had happened. I wasn't going to let them get away with it, not without knowing the truth. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that something was off. The single sentence I overheard Vivian's father say, "As long as she doesn't talk, we're in the clear," kept echoing in my mind. What was he talking about? Why were they so afraid of me speaking? I replayed everything from the past year. The changes in Ethan, his sudden wealth, the shared bank account I had once seen. It didn't seem like a mistake anymore. I realized this was a much bigger issue, a hidden scheme that Vivian and her family were trying to cover up, and Ethan was either involved or unaware. Determined to uncover the truth, I dug deeper, spending hours searching through records and reaching out to old contacts. A former colleague from the bank confirmed my suspicions, telling me that the account I had seen was suspicious. "Too clean," she said, possibly a front. The more I investigated, the more I uncovered. Shell companies, fake invoices, and financial transactions tied to unregistered businesses. It was becoming clear. This wasn't just about Vivian's dislike for me. It was a well-crafted fraud operation. Ethan was either complicit or unknowingly a part of it. I wasn't going to sit back and let it ruin him. Each discovery pushed me to keep going, to find out how deep this went. The financial documents, fake companies, and hidden money painted a picture of a larger scheme involving money laundering. The realization that Ethan could be a pawn in their game hit me hard, but I was determined to expose the truth. I couldn't let them destroy my son's future, no matter the cost. As I dug deeper, I came across a legal document. Vivian had changed her name. It seemed innocent at first, but the date suggested it was after she started dating Ethan, as if she had planned her life around him. I dug further and found court records confirming the name change, along with suspicious financial transactions. These invoices came from companies that didn't exist, addresses that led nowhere, or to fake offices. This wasn't just a simple mistake. It was fraud, and it was linked to Vivian and her family. They were hiding something, and Ethan was caught in the middle. I had seen enough red flags in my life to know when something wasn't right, and these documents were full of them. I could feel the weight of the discovery press down on me. The more I looked, the clearer it became. Vivian and her family weren't just playing a game. They were running a money laundering operation. And somehow, my son had become entangled in it. I found more documents detailing transactions from these fake companies to a series of untraceable accounts. I had no idea what to make of it at first, but it was becoming undeniable. Vivian's family was hiding something much larger than I had ever imagined. These were not just business deals gone wrong. This was an intricate fraud scheme, and Ethan had unknowingly become a pawn in it. It was like a slow-motion car crash. Every new document I uncovered sent my thoughts spiraling. I had to keep reminding myself that I wasn't just being paranoid. These were real, concrete pieces of evidence. The invoices, the name change, the accounts, the shady companies. It was all there in front of me, plain as day. Vivian had orchestrated all of this. And even worse, Ethan had been dragged into it, whether he realized it or not. As I pieced it together, my heart ached. I thought about all the times I had tried to support Ethan, all the ways I had tried to be there for him. I had never suspected this was happening. I had never imagined he could be so blind to the danger he was in. But I had to ask myself, did he know? Did Ethan know what Vivian and her family were doing? Was he a part of this? Or was he simply too in love to see the truth? The question haunted me. I had spent my life fighting for him, but now I didn't know if he was a victim or a willing participant in something that could ruin his life. And that's when I realized I had a choice to make. I could confront Ethan, lay everything out in front of him, and demand answers. I could expose everything I had found, every shady transaction, every fake company, every lie Vivian had told. But that came with a risk. What if he was involved? What if he had known all along and didn't tell me? The thought twisted in my stomach. I didn't want to believe it, but the possibility was too real. What if Ethan didn't know? What if he was being used by Vivian and her family? What if he was as much a victim as I was? Confronting him without knowing the full truth could destroy our relationship forever. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I wasn't sure if I could handle it. If he was complicit, everything I believed about him, the child I raised with love, would shatter. But if he was innocent, I needed to protect him, to help him see the truth. I was torn. I had spent my life loving and protecting him, and the thought that he could be involved in something so deceitful made me sick. But how could I confront him without knowing if he was guilty or blind? This moral dilemma weighed on me, but I knew I had to know the truth. I couldn't ignore the evidence. Whether Ethan was complicit or a victim, I had to act. I had gathered everything. The name change, the fake companies, the financial records, and the weight of it was unbearable. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront Ethan. My hands shook as I pulled up in front of his apartment, my heart pounding. I didn't know how he'd react, but things would never be the same. When he opened the door, I could see the surprise on his face. Maybe he thought I'd let it go, but I wasn't. I stepped inside, the tension thick in the air. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady, but full of emotion. "I need to talk to you." His expression shifted from shock to concern. "Mom, what's going on? You look upset." I sat down, took a deep breath, and pulled out the folder filled with all the evidence I had uncovered. "I know what's been going on," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I know about the name change, the shell companies, the money laundering." His face went pale as he scanned the documents, his panic evident. The silence between us was deafening before he finally looked up, guilt in his eyes. In that moment, I knew the truth. He had known. He was part of it. "Mom, I didn't think it would matter," he said, his voice quiet, almost ashamed. My heart shattered. He had known. He had been aware of the fraud, the lies, and hadn't cared enough to tell me. I felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. I had trusted him, done everything for him, and now he was admitting that he had been complicit in something so dark. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his admission. "You knew," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You knew and didn't tell me?" He nodded, his eyes avoiding mine. I thought maybe it would blow over. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't want to believe it was really happening. The words made my skin crawl. He didn't want to believe it was happening. How could he ignore it? How could he stand by and let Vivian and her family manipulate him, use him in their scheme, and still turn a blind eye? I had raised him to be better than this, to do the right thing no matter what. But in that moment, I realized that he hadn't been the son I thought I knew. He hadn't been the boy who looked up to me, the boy who once called me his hero. I wasn't sure who he was anymore. The betrayal I felt was indescribable. It wasn't just that he had known about the fraud. It was that he had chosen to stay silent. He had chosen Vivian and her family over me, over everything we had built together. But despite all the anger, despite the devastation I felt, something else was starting to settle in. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about punishing him or trying to make him feel the same pain I felt. It was about something far bigger. It was about truth, and it was about justice. I wasn't going to let Vivian and her family get away with this. I wasn't going to sit back and allow them to destroy everything my son had worked for, everything I had worked for. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, not just because they had hurt me, but because they had hurt everyone they had touched. I wasn't going to stand by and let them manipulate my son any longer. "You need to make this right," I said, my voice steady, but with a new sense of resolve. "You have to face the truth, Ethan. You can't hide from it anymore." He looked at me, his face filled with a mix of guilt and confusion. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the part of him that was still trying to justify his actions, still trying to convince himself that it was all okay. But it wasn't okay. None of it was. "I can't fix this for you," I continued, my voice firm now. "You have to do this. You have to stop it before it destroys everything." The tears I had been holding back finally started to fall, but they weren't tears of anger. They weren't even tears of sadness. They were tears of clarity, because for the first time, I understood what needed to be done. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I wasn't just trying to salvage my relationship with my son. I was standing up for what was right. Ethan had to face the consequences of his actions, but so did Vivian and her family. They couldn't keep living this lie, manipulating and hurting people to get what they wanted. They had to be exposed. "I don't know if I can make this right," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "But I know I have to try." I nodded, a small sense of relief washing over me. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that. But I also knew that the truth was the only thing that would set things right. Not just for me, but for Ethan, for the people Vivian and her family had hurt. And maybe, just maybe, this would give us a chance to rebuild. If not as we were before, but as something more honest, more real. I stood up, looking at Ethan one last time before I left the room. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth, Ethan. And I hope, deep down, you understand why." I didn't wait for a response. I had made my decision. And the truth would come out, no matter the cost. After the confrontation with Ethan, things began to unfold in ways I never expected. But each piece of the puzzle I had uncovered fell into place, like a heavy curtain finally lifting. I had been afraid of what would happen when I exposed the truth. But I realized that I was no longer afraid of the fallout. Once I had gathered all the evidence, everything from the fake companies to the money laundering, the name change documents, and the financial transactions, I knew that the truth would not stay hidden for long. I wasn't seeking revenge, but I wasn't going to stand by and let them get away with it. The moment I decided to speak out, Things started to unravel. I contacted the authorities, and after a lengthy investigation, the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. Vivian's carefully constructed life started to collapse. The fake companies she and her family had been using as fronts were exposed, and the authorities began to trace the illegal transactions back to her. The truth about the money laundering scheme spread quickly through the media, and Vivian's social life crumbled. She was no longer the picture of grace and success. Her wealth, her status, and her carefully curated image were nothing more than a facade that had now been completely shattered. It wasn't just the professional world that turned its back on her. Her personal relationships, including her marriage to Ethan, began to feel the weight of the scandal. Her father, who had been so supportive of her during all of this, found himself dragged into the mess. His dental practice faced public scrutiny, and soon after, his staff began leaving in droves. Vivian's fall from grace was swift and unforgiving, and it wasn't just her life that unraveled. It was the life they had built together. While everything fell apart for Vivian, I found something inside me I hadn't expected. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel any sense of triumph or joy in watching her downfall. What I felt instead was peace. It was a quiet kind of empowerment that came from knowing that I had done the right thing, that I had finally taken control of my own life and stopped being a passive observer. I didn't need to seek revenge to feel powerful. I had achieved justice simply by refusing to remain silent, by standing up for myself, for my truth. I had found the strength to take back my power. In exposing the fraud, I had freed myself from the shackles of a toxic relationship and a life of compromise. I no longer felt like I had to hide in the shadows, waiting for Ethan or Vivian to accept me or validate my worth. As the investigation unfolded and the truth came out, I didn't follow the drama or obsess over what was happening to them. I realized that I didn't need to be a part of that world anymore. My focus shifted inward. The more I let go of the anger, the more I found a deep sense of inner peace. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all Ethan or Vivian. My role in their lives had ended, and for the first time in years, I felt free from the emotional chains that had bound me, free from the lies and manipulations, free from the false narrative that had been forced upon me. I had built a life that was truly my own. I started to focus on my own well-being, rebuilding my life without the toxic energy they brought into it. I took up new hobbies, spent more time with friends who truly cared for me, and even started to travel a little, something I had always dreamed of doing, but never had the chance for. I didn't need to be surrounded by people who only saw me as a tool for their success. I had found my own purpose, and that was enough. I didn't look back at the wreckage of my past relationship with Ethan and Vivian. I had done everything I could for Ethan, given him every chance to make the right decisions. But he had chosen his path, and I had to accept that. I was no longer trying to fix or change things that were beyond my control. I had accepted the truth, and in doing so, I had found freedom. The more I let go of the desire for reconciliation, the more I realized that peace wasn't found in what I had lost. It was found in what I was now building. I was moving forward, not looking back, and I no longer needed to measure my worth by their standards. I didn't care if they never apologized or if they didn't recognize the value of everything I had done for them. I had learned the most important lesson of all. I had value, and that value was never going to be defined by anyone else but me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, alive, strong, and authentic. My relationship with Ethan was still a question mark, but it no longer consumed me. I had released the need for closure, for answers. I was at peace with myself, and that was enough. It wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about truth and living a life that was mine to control. And that was more than enough for me. As the weeks passed, I found myself slowly rebuilding my life. The wreckage of my past, what used to be my family, no longer weighed me down. I stopped waiting for Ethan's apology or for any form of validation from him or Vivian. I had spent too many years thinking that my worth depended on their acceptance, their approval. But now, I knew better. I had learned that my value wasn't defined by how others saw me. It came from within, from the strength I had shown in the face of everything they had put me through. I wasn't the woman I had been before, silent, unsure, waiting in the wings. I was stronger, more self-assured, and, most importantly, at peace. I focused on my own happiness now. I started doing the things that brought me joy, things I had put off for too long. I picked up old hobbies I had forgotten about, like gardening, and found solace in the quiet of my home. Surrounded by plants and blooming flowers, I spent more time with friends who uplifted me, who supported me unconditionally, and I even began to travel, something I had always dreamed of doing, but had never had the chance to pursue. I didn't feel the need to look back at the past or to dwell on what I had lost. I had found a new path, one that didn't require me to explain myself to anyone. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me feel whole. I was complete on my own. And just when I thought I had moved on from everything, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I was at home, sitting in the garden with a book, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened the door cautiously. Standing there was a woman I didn't recognize. She looked to be in her late 20s, holding the hand of a small child, maybe 4 or 5 years old. She smiled at me gently, and, before I could say anything, she introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm Ethan's first wife." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't even known Ethan had been married before. And here she was, standing at my doorstep. She explained that she had tracked me down after seeing my name in a few articles related to the investigation, and she had something important to share. As I listened, my world shifted once again. She told me that Ethan had been married to her years before, overseas, and had left her and their child without a word. She had filed for abandonment, and she had been searching for him ever since. That's when she introduced me to the little boy by her side. Ethan's son, my grandson. My heart swelled with emotion. I had never known he existed. Sophia explained that she didn't want anything from me. No money, no revenge. She just wanted Ethan's son to know his family, to have a place where he wouldn't be forgotten. I was overwhelmed, unsure of how to react. But something deep within me stirred. This child, this innocent boy, had been left in the shadows of Ethan's past, and now he was here, standing before me. I looked at Sophia, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something beyond the hurt and anger. I felt hope. I knew that I couldn't change the past, but I could build a future, a new family, one that wasn't built on deceit or manipulation. I welcomed them both into my life with open arms. The bitterness I had carried for so long started to fade, replaced by a sense of peace I had never expected. This was a new chapter. It wasn't the one I had imagined for myself, but it was better in ways I couldn't have predicted. With my grandson now part of my life, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't looking for closure from Ethan anymore. I had found something far more important: connection. I was finally ready to leave the past behind and embrace a future full of love, truth, and a fresh start. Thanks for listening to me. I am more than thankful to you. If this story fascinated you anyway, kindly do subscribe to my channel. Also, comment your thoughts on my story. I would love to hear from you. Once again, thank you so much.